Good evening and welcome to tonight's Committee of the Whole meeting for June 25, 2019. Clerk will call the roll, please.
Nelson.
Yeah, here.
Hildebrandt.
Here.
Fernsler.
Yes.
Wilson.
Here.
Odekirk. Hanson.
Here.
Sedlacek. Gilson.
Let the record show we have a quorum for Committee of the Whole. The next order of business is the recap of water and sewer laterals. And tonight we have our Administrator Brian Yurgis and you, Director Austin from DPW. So I'll let the two of you do your tag team and go for
Yeah,
it.
we have a lot of information to go over tonight, and we're going to try to hopefully fit it all in. And with that, I think I'll just have Director Austin kind of start. She's just going to recap again difference between water laterals, sewer laterals, and then some of the information we found from other communities.
I know we've received this a couple times, illustrating the water, who owns what of the water, but I did print some new ones out, so I can get, if you don't have one, I didn't make as many copies as I passed them out of that one. And then I did make additional copies, because this one we have not looked at, is kind of an illustration of the sanitary laterals. And so just kind of a recap on the water. So the utility owns the main under the roadway, and then also the service lateral up into the curb stop, which is usually located between the sidewalk and the curb and gutter. So that's utility owned. Then the private homeowner owns from that shutoff valve, the curb stop, to their home. So that's the water. On the sanitary side, the private owner owns the entire lateral all the way from their home to the main, including the connection to the main. So that is how the utilities have run their operation with who owns what. So I just want to give that kind of as the overall background, kind of a refresher. And then I'm just going to go through some of the communities that we spoke with. And I know I'm not going to rehash the communities that I talked to last May. We had the memo dated back then, and it is in the packet, but I did talk to some new communities at the direction of Alderman Hanson. And so we can just go through those briefly, and then I can take some questions. So in New Berlin, so they're southeast Wisconsin yet. Their population's about 40,000 people, and they're a newer community, kind of a suburb of kind of the outskirts of Milwaukee, so they don't have lead issues. And then on the sanitary lateral side of things, they did do a pilot project last year lining the private laterals, but that was because they were given funding from Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewer District and who they discharge their sewer to, and they have a capacity issue, so they gave grants to communities to do some lining pilot programs. So that's currently how, kind of the only project that they have done on the sanitary side of things. And they don't offer, because that was the only project, they don't have any grants of any sort that they offer. So Kiel, I did talk with Kiel Utilities, and so on the water lateral, they do mandate the private side to be replaced when they're replacing their side of things. So they've been doing that for about 10 years. And then they assess the property owner that length of footage. So from the curb stop to the home is assessed back to the property owner, but they do mandate. On the sanitary side of things, when sewer main is being replaced, they will televise each lateral to find if there's a deficiency. So in their criteria, deficiencies are offsets, if they're seeing leakage from cracks or kind of that. It's not strictly done by material type, it's by that they have to see a deficiency. And so if they find a deficiency, they mandate that it's replaced. And they assess the property owner from the right-of-way line to the home. So Kiel Utilities does pay for the portion under the roadway to get it outside the roadway. They do not do a sewer project every year. So this year, their project is only water. So they didn't look at sanitary at all. So they only did water. So the homeowners were only assessed their water. And they assess on a 7-year loan program. And then on average, they've seen the assessments between $4,000 and $5,000 for sewer and water lateral replacements, and about $2,000 if it's just water lateral replacement. And so far, they've only allowed pipe bursting, not open cutting, to eliminate some of the landscaping complaints they might get.
Just a quick, do they mandate the sewer to the home?
If they find a deficiency.
Okay.
So the entirety is mandated if they find a deficiency. Yep.
Which,
Is leakage
is
offsets of
correct.
something.
correct.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
if they do the main.
If they do the
street,
main,
Then they may make them? Or
nope, they
street?
have to still find a deficiency.
In the home?
In the private lateral portion, yep. But and then if they find a deficiency, it's mandated. Yep.
So it's not every home, everyone within this, the stretch of the project, it's based on deficiency. I just want to make sure everyone understands that, because that's very different from Sheboygan Falls program, for example.
So kind of leading into Sheboygan Falls. So they mandate, so back to kind of the water side, they do mandate lateral replacement, and they assess the property owner from the curb stop to the home. That's what they, that's what's private on their side too. And then on the sewer side, they mandate, no, I'm on the right side, sorry. So they would mandate, now are they clay? Sorry, I have to find that.
I believe the clay,
They have a
Material.
material listing,
Correct.
right, that needs
yes,
to,
non-code compliant,
Yeah.
which is the clay material.
thank you. And then, so then they assess, they also pay for the portion under the right-of-way, and then they assess the property owner for the remaining, so from the property line to the home. And they do not offer any grant program, it's all assessments, all loans and assessments.
10 years.
Yes, that's a 10-year program. Yep, where Keel is 7 years, Sheboygan Falls is 10. And then the city of Burlington, so that's kind of Racine County, well, Racine, Kenosha County. They have a population of about 10,000, a little over 10,000. They do not mandate lead line replacements on the private side. They do partials, similar to what we're doing now with just the utility side replacement. And then on the sanitary, they do extend the sanitary laterals out of the roadway at no cost to the homeowner, so they pick up that piece as well. They send out letters at that time, though, to the residents, letting them know that it's in their best interest to do the entirety, but they do not mandate. And then, so those are the 4 communities that I've most recently called. And then in addition to the communities I spoke with, Administrator Yurgis sent an email out to members of the Wisconsin City County Management Association and then received a couple responses. And his questions were purely on the sewer side of things, not on the water side of things. So in Hartford, they do not mandate replacement. And so if they end up being replaced, it's at the homeowner's expense. In Wisconsin Rapids, the replacement is required if the condition of the lateral is in poor condition, so they'll televise, or is clay or Orangeburg pipe. And since the laterals belong to the property owner, the city special assesses any lateral work that is mandated. So they only mandate the portion under the roadway, and paid for by the property owner. And it appears as if time to time they have lined a portion of private laterals based on what the project is all entailing and stuff. But so they have lined portions of the laterals. In Clintonville, they do not mandate replacement. They do notify them if they're found to be in bad shape during construction projects when they televise the line, but they do not mandate. And if they have to do anything, they do assess for sanitary laterals from the sewer main to the property line, unless grants are involved that do not allow them to do that. So if they got a grant to help pay for the actual project, and they're, by the grant regulations, they're not allowed to do assessments. So I know, like, if they're doing a roadway project under CDBG funds, you cannot do assessments. So some communities do roadway projects with CDBG funds, and you cannot then assess property owners for any work. If they do complete sewer lining, they dig up and replace laterals that are old and in need of replacement to the property line, and they do assess. And if they're in plastic and in good shape, they do not have to do anything. So those are the communities that responded to the initial post by Administrator Yergis. And then just kind of Googling it too, we found City of Madison. So I know the City of Madison has replaced their lead lines, right, through kind of, I think we discussed the cell phone tower money, I believe is what they did as a program. But their sanitary lines, they actually had contracted with a service to offer insurance. I did kind of go on, so that's the Service Line America. They do not offer coverage up in our area, but they do. Did you reach out to them?
Yeah, so I actually called them and talked to a representative, and they said that, yes, when you put the zip code in, Plymouth, Wisconsin, it says it's not available.
Yep, that's what I had.
However, if someone calls them and explains what they want, they will provide coverage.
Yeah, I put the zip code in.
Yeah.
And so then it's like an insurance program that you could pay monthly fees to, and then at the time of failure, you could collect on insurance. So that's what the City of Madison, it looks like at one point, they held the contract with Service America, but in, I think, spring of 19, so just this past year, they've terminated that contract for new people, and the new residents that would want that service would have to contact them directly. But that's how City of Madison handles at least their sanitary portion.
Yeah, in the packet too, there was an article too that's the city of Milwaukee also offers that program, or at least did at one point. I don't know if there's a date on this article, but this was within the last few years. And at that time, this is a little old, but at that time, the service warranty in Milwaukee for a program was $9.50 a month. Or a full year for $100. Now, this is a couple years old, but Milwaukee, or $100 a year, or $9.50 a month. A few years old, but this is an article, City of Milwaukee had promoted a similar program.
So we kind of have discussed previously, all communities kind of do it in some way, fashion, a little bit different. And then, so we need to decide how, we ultimately, as a community, want to move forward.
I know on one of the responses, didn't they say that they mandated it and they had no complaints from that point? Was that?
Falls did that.
Sheboygan Falls.
Yeah, that was what was stated from Sheboygan Falls, that there were no complaints.
Whether that's on workmanship or on,
Yeah.
I don't, I
Just,
can't answer
I
that.
was thinking about the cost.
So as we kind of said at committee meetings, again, communities all across the state, there's not one consistent policy throughout the state. There's many different variations. I'm not going to go through all kind of the lead service workshop meetings, but just to give some background where we started last year, when we started talking about this was in April of last year. So if you just kind of look at the April 24th, 2018 PowerPoint that's in the packet. Slide 3, at one point, just to recap, we did talk about potentially after a project, because they say if you only do a partial lead replacement, that the elevated lead levels are maybe for the first 60 days, and then after that, it kind of goes away. We did talk about potentially offering a water filter program, so that was something we had talked about, and $15 to $35 per home is basically what it would cost for that filter. And then starting on slide 5, the questions we started out with, how aggressive should the city of Plymouth be with lead service infrastructure projects? Slide 6, question number 2, should the city mandate private lead water service replacements? That's on slide 6. Slide 7, question 3, we asked the council.
Page 7, I'm sorry.
Yeah, page 7, I'm sorry, page 7. Page 7, question 3, we asked the council, if a water lateral grant program is offered, what should it look like? Are you okay with grant programs subsidized by non-lead service residential customers? For example, 25%, if 25% of customers have lead services, should the other 75% subsidize? That was a question we asked the council. And 2, with question 4, should the city mandate private sewer lateral replacements? So that's kind of how we kicked off that discussion, some of those critical issues or questions in April. And then, I'm not going to go through it in detail, but the May 8th presentation kind of has little sticky notes in the photos. That kind of shows where the council was at that time, as of May 18th, in terms of what the individual members kind of voted for. Really, the closest one was page 5, where should the city mandate private lead water service replacements? At that time, 4 people said no and 3 people said yes. But then they said, the 3 people that said yes, but offer a loan program / special assessment. The other 4 said, keep it voluntary like we do it today. And then we continued the discussion on May 29th. And eventually, I should also say in the packet, then you have the individual meeting minutes from all those meetings. What eventually came out of those series of meetings was basically staff and legal counsel at that time was asked by the majority of the council as to whether it's possible to establish a sewer charge, sewer reconnection fee in the amount of basically $750, which would cover that portion on the sewer side, from the main to the kind of outside of the right of way. And then the council adopted resolution 22. With that, we adopted the lead services plan, but then point number 2 in there, it says adopts construction standards for sewer main projects that include a provision for replacing a portion of the private sewer lateral in order to get the lateral out of the road right of way. Such cost will be borne by the sewer utility and supported by the user charges for the system. And then actually resolution 23 then formally established the $750, and it was titled as a reconnection hookup fee. That resolution was prepared by attorney Mike Bauer with Crystal's firm, and then also he did the legwork too on the legal work to make sure that we could structure the sewer rate that way. The sewer utility is responsible for that portion, but the sewer rate that is charged or rate that was established was the $750 reconnection fee billed by the utility. And then if that doesn't get paid by roughly October 15th, that $750 would then be placed on the tax roll for December tax bill, and then actually they could get away with probably not paying it until like the following July. So they would have almost a year or longer to pay that $750, just so you understood how that happened. So I'm not going to go over all the history, but you have the meeting minutes, you have some of the PowerPoint presentations that we walked through as a committee, and you have the resolutions that the Common Council officially approved. Next thing, I just want to kind of highlight this. Thanks for Anna and the clerk's office for doing all the highlighting for me. But it kind of highlighted some of the key points in this. This came from a newsletter from Boardman Clark. They kind of summarized currently throughout the entire state of Wisconsin, there's 3 municipalities where programs are approved for lead services on the utility side. That includes Kenosha, Manitowoc, and Menasha. And if you read through it, all 3 programs are completely different. Okay, So in Kenosha's program, and we're only talking about water again, we're not talking about sewer. In Kenosha's program, they offer a 50% grant for lead services up to $2,000, and then they provide a loan for the remainder of the amount. And so both the grant and the loan is through the water utility. In Manitowoc's case, their approved PSC program is a loan through the water utility, 10 years at 2.5%, up to $6,000. So if it was more than $6,000, the homeowner would be responsible for anything above that dollar amount. And then Menasha, completely different than the other two, they have a 1/3 grant from the city, meaning probably from the Capital Projects Fund. They have a 1/3 grant from the water utility, and both of those are up to $1,000 each. And then after that, through the water utility, they provide a 5-year low-interest loan. Doesn't say what the interest rate is. In Kenosha's case, if the loan is not paid, or in the case of Kenosha's case, the loan that's provided, how they get that back is a special charge on the tax roll. So they pay that once a year on the tax roll. But they're still using water utility money to initially pay for it. And then when they pay it on the tax roll, that money then goes back to the water utility. So a transfer from the general fund back to the water utility. Manitowoc and Menasha, somehow, I'm not quite sure how they did it, but I'm guessing they somehow modified their billing system to have a monthly payment on their water bill. So a little bit different, a once a year payment versus a once a month payment. Okay. In the case of Sheboygan Falls, they have a once a year payment, or you can come in and pay in full whenever you want to. One other thing, I think I maybe put it in here somewhere, but I did want to mention that underneath municipal ordinance for the city of Plymouth, if we use the special assessment process, I should maybe get into that later, but it is a 7-year loan or a 7-year payback period on any special assessment that we do with the city of Plymouth. That's per our existing ordinance. So just everyone understands that if you're looking at a 10-year, doing it a special assessment on a 10-year basis, we'd have to modify the ordinance to allow for a 10-year special assessment because our ordinance says 7 years. Yes.
This sheet here, the three places, this was not allowed until January of 2018, until the governors passed and the senators legislation passed that this could take place. Other than that, they could not. Am I correct about that or not?
Well, Governor Walker, yes, signed 2017 Wisconsin Act 137, and then basically in January or February 2018, it became law. And at that time, this program is not a possibility underneath a water utility program.
So this is pretty new as far as things go.
The other thing I should say, if you do a program through the water utility, it does require that you come, all 3 communities were mandated that they had to come in for a full water rate case within the first 2 years of a program. So when that happens, any water rate increase will likely be larger than just the cost of this program because you're doing a full rate case study. So everybody understands that. And then just for sort of, I don't want to say fun, but just kind of for informational purposes. So this amortization schedule. So what Sheboygan Falls does is they borrow money for the program through the state trust fund loan, and then they, because they do it over a 10-year period, they're borrowing on the 6 to 10-year rate bracket, which is 3.75%. And then per their code, they require a 1% add-on. So the special assessment actually comes out to a 4.75% interest rate on those loans. And so I just did that payment once a year over 7 years at 4.75 for a $3,000 special assessment. That comes out to $514 on an annual basis then for 7 years. And then, I just threw in on the backside $5,000. What would it look like if it was a $5,000 special assessment? And, at that same percent, and that's $856. So, you know, just, you know, for information, I don't think it's a fair comparison, but at least you kind of know how that, you know, we mandate for the $750 charge. We're not mandating anything else, but we're requiring that $750 charge. How does that $750 charge just compare to maybe a special assessment? You know, it is multiple, you just understand that that's the difference.
Are you talking water now, or are you talking about sewer now?
No, either way, whether they special assess for water or sewer, they're doing it on a 3.75% with a 1% adder. So whether the water or sewer cost, whatever it is, whatever the total cost for the sewer lateral and the water lateral that they're special assessing, this is the interest rate they would charge.
For 10 years, not 7, though.
Yes, that is true, 10 years, 10
It'd be
years,
a little,
correct. It
little
would be,
bit less
it-
than that.
the payment would be a little bit less, but the interest rate, yes. So I did it, correction, I did it based on our ordinance where we require 7 years underneath the City of Plymouth code. Yes, so without changing our code to 10 years and following the current code at 7 years and doing the same kind of 4.75, that's how it would, yeah. The interest would be a little bit more than, but you're correct, the payment would be a little bit less.
John?
Brian, I have a question on this, where it says mandatory replacement, that allows provision of financial assistance only if it's required. So by financial assistance, does that mean grant
Or loan, only water utility.
Also,
This only applies if you're using the water utility to provide grant funding or financing funding for water laterals.
okay,
So if you just do a loan program and you're using water utility revenue, you still have to get PSC approval for the program.
okay.
And mandated.
And you have to mandate, correct?
But if we used some other source of money, I don't
Correct.
know what that would be, then.
Well, we'll get to that.
Okay,
We're-
all
I have a whole section on that, yes.
And the same would be true for the sewer lateral?
No, the PSC does not approve the sewer program.
Okay, all right, so we'd be.
They
under
would
that.
have for Plymouth up until 2014 because we became a deregulated sewer
Right.
utility in 2014. However, the council should generally be aware that a ratepayer can make a complaint to the PSC about sewer rates and say that the sewer rate structure is unjustly structured, and does not reflect the service that an individual gets. That's very rare, and then the PSC could open a docket and investigate your structure for sewer rates. And they can also do that on the storm water utility side as well. Not too many people realize that, but technically that is true, but they do not approve the sewer utility program because we're deregulated. Okay? So now I just kind of wanted to go to this next. Just some of this is just kind of informational, and then also, you know, some of this is just, I guess, how I've hit, you know, just kind of how I've historically looked at some of these things as well. But I think, you know, it's been referenced Sheboygan Falls a lot, so that's why I just kind of picked them to look at. And this was, I did this at about 4:30 today, so I just kind of scratched this out. But the Sheboygan Falls water and sewer rates are from their website. And then what I just did is I just, you know, for comparison purposes, you know, how do our utility rates compare on a water and sewer basis? And the rate structures are different. For example, in Sheboygan Falls, they base their rates on units of 1,000 gallons. We base our rates on 100 cubic feet, units of 100 cubic feet. So, you know, there's a difference in terms of how the volumes are calculated. But I kind of did that basis. So when you look at Sheboygan Falls from a public fire protection and a fixed charge for the water meter, the 5/8 water meter. Those two costs total up to $19.85, and then for Plymouth, ours is $18.80 for the fixed fees. Again, that's the public fire protection charge, and then the fixed fee on the utility side. And then you add the volume charge, and our cost is $3.09 per 100 cubic feet. So if the average home has about 6 units of those, 6 multiplied by 309, the volume charge on an average home might be $18.54. So the total cost for an average home on the water side could be around $37.34 for the city of Plymouth. On Falls, because they're 6 units of 100 cubic feet equal 4,488 gallons. And so you do the same multiplication just based on their rate structure. On the water side, it comes out to $32.19. So Plymouth's rates are about $5 more on the water side than Sheboygan Falls. I wouldn't say that's significant. You'll see a lot of variation in water rates throughout the state of Wisconsin. A lot of that has to do with capital investments and where you are in the cycle. On the sewer side, you'll see quite a bit of a different difference there. The biggest reason, I would guess, and of course I haven't done a detailed analysis of their system, but the biggest thing is Sheboygan Falls, they don't have a treatment plant. So they're sending their sewer to the city of Sheboygan. So they don't have those costs like Plymouth has. But our fixed fee on the sewer side was $9.50. And then we have the same type of unit per 100 cubic feet. So our January 1, 2020 rate is $3.50. The council just approved that. So based on the fixed fee and the volume charge, a typical customer in Plymouth will probably be about $30.50 a month for sewer. In Falls, based on current rates, their fixed fee is a lot lower, $3.83. And then they actually have their volume charge is separated into 2 buckets. One is a general volume charge of $2.59 per 1,000 gallons. But then they have sewer replacement, which is also 77 cents per 1,000 gallons. So the two of those added together is $3.36. So again, you take that, multiply that by the 4,488 gallons, you get about $15. And so, in Falls, their total sewer bill on average comes in under $19. Where ours is about $30. So just for comparison, how our sewer utility rates compare to theirs. Now that 77 cents, I were to surmise, and again, I haven't asked this question, but in terms of covering the cost from the sewer main outside of the right-of-way, I would guess that cost is supposed to be covered, along with the cost of the main, is probably part of this volume charge of 77 cents per 1,000 gallons. Okay, that's where I would guess they put their cost. Right now, our cost is a $750 direct charge, right? So that's where they put that in their rate structure. Earlier, and I didn't include it in this packet, but earlier, what was that, February, Council President Hanson, you asked me what would it maybe look like if we put that into sewer rates. And I put together a memo and shared that with all of you. And I said there would have to be more discussion about what the council's goals or priorities would be from a rate design perspective, but just going off the cuff here and put together a memo what it would look like. I prepared a memo and a brief analysis where it came to roughly 75 cents per month to cover the cost from the main to the right-of-way. That's in that memo that I prepared for Alder Hildebrand and Alder Hanson.
Sewer or that water?
No, sewer, I'm talking about sewer.
Okay.
And at that time, I said that if not all rate classes benefit from a sewer lateral program, and it's really only single-family and multifamily, or called duplexes, benefit. It doesn't make sense to put that cost of that sewer lateral to get it outside of the roadway into the volume cost, because then you have commercial and industrial customers paying for that, for a service they don't get. And so what I suggest is you'd probably put that in the fixed fee charge. And so our $9.50 would become more like $10.25 on a fixed fee. And that comes out to $9 a year. I'm just recapping what I provided to the council last, I think it was around February of this year. So again, rate structure, when you look at each community, rate structures are different, how they calculate their bills are different. But if the council said, no, we want to put the cost of at least through the right-of-way into the sewer rates, what staff suggested is you put that in the volume charge for the 5/8 meter, which is mostly, not 100%, but mostly residential in nature, not all, and that rate class would bear most of the cost of that program. In the base fee, yep, not the volume charge, yep, the fixed fee. Going to the next slide, this is just, this is kind of lead into the other discussions, but this wonderful line chart, this is just information, and the council should just be aware. If you look, actually, I'm sorry about that. I just realized that the years on the bottom are disappearing. But the first point on the line is 2008, and the last is 2018. That was there earlier today. I must have deleted it, or it's not showing up. So what this is millions of gallons of water and sewer based on sales. And so from 2008 through the end of 2018, overall, our total water volume in sales decreased by 1% or negative 0.6%. At the same time, our revenue grew by 58%. Well, how is that possible? Well, if you recall, back a number of years ago, we did a major water rate case, and they approved a two-step increase. That was right around when we approved reservoir number 3, which was $1.5 million project where we added our third reservoir, our first one since 1941. But at that time, we were doing a water rate case, and we did a 2-tier water rate increase, and it was about a 40% increase there. Through that full water rate case at that time. And so although our volume charges, or our volume over a decade has decreased by 1%, because of cost increases, you guys should just be aware that has resulted in a higher fixed fee and volume charges. And the same can be said on the sewer side. Over a 10-year period, our sewer volumes, in terms of billable sales, have actually decreased by 5.3% over that 10 years. And at the same time, our revenue increased by 52.4%. Again, we did sewer rate increases and sewer rate studies on that. And as a result of needing to increase revenue based on flat sales, it's higher fixed fee charges and higher volume charges. I just want to make sure that everybody understands the trend and where sales have been and how that has impacted our, call it, pricing on our services.
What did they, not board this company, but what did that affect? Because that really decreased the amount of sales of water and sewer usage when that dropped. That was a big
Yes.
amount. So that affected in here, that doesn't show in here, but that
Correct, as well as other improvements on an industrial standpoint. And I think I had that little note, and it isn't in my pocket. Magic note. I wrote this down. Interesting. It's interesting. We could be talking tax policy for a whole year, but Brian just wanted to know this answer, so I had to look this up today. So our property valuation over the last 10 years, actually, on the city side, so property tax base, actually grew by 18%. And I just wanted to see how did our property value grow in comparison to like water, sewer, and electric sales. Just wanted to see, because at the end of the day, the math is the same, right? Whatever your cost for a city is, now you have other revenues, but your tax levy is spread across the valuation of your community. Well, the same thing on the as from a utility perspective. You're not spreading that over property values, but you're spreading that over volume charges essentially. The city actually had 19% growth in revenue over the last decade, so about 1.9% a year. And the tax rate increased by 10% over 10 years, so about 1% a year. And as valuation goes up, and when the TIF districts close, we'll actually see a reduction in the tax rate when our TIF 4 and 5 and 6 close, because there's more valuation in the non-TID. I just thought that was kind of interesting that, many times we there's limitations we can do on the city side, but, from a property valuation, we've grown by 18%, our revenue's grown by 19%. Just kind of interesting how that would compare to volumes, but get back on topic, I guess. And then last year,
Brian, John has a question.
yes,
I'm kind of going back a ways, but you said, they look at the sewer laterals and would send the camera down and look at them. I mean, how much leakage is there generally? Is it significant where if all of them were
Well-
mined, that you would really reduce the volume to the plant?
yeah, so, actually, I can the city of Milwaukee, had a UW, Madison, class in 2010, study the sewer lateral issue. And, in that study, and I can send it to you guys if you want, and I can't remember who the footnote was from, but I can send it to you. But in their analysis, when they referenced some other data, and I think it came from some water environmental or water groups, in that report, it said that roughly 75% of infiltration and inflow is from sewer main, and about 25% is from sewer laterals. So and I can send that to you guys all, but that's what that report said. And I think there's probably not a lot of studies on that, but it would probably vary from community to community based on, again, what kind of investments have you made into your sewer infrastructure? What kind of, what's the age of your community? If you go, what was it, New Berlin said, well, we're a suburb, right? And most of our development has been in the last few decades. They probably don't have a big, maybe as big of an I&I problem, potentially.
Well, when the contractors were on Reed Street or Hine or wherever, and they were looking at those private laterals, were they seeing significant inflow from groundwater, or wasn't
They
that?
did, on Hine Avenue, when they stuck the camera down the main, there's not much flow, because they're kind of both the starting point, actually, there's a high point in Hine, and
Yeah.
the sanitary goes both directions, and so there's not much, flow. As far as I&I, we've never done a study of where we don't have any flow meters put in anywhere, or,
Yeah,
any of that, to try to start focusing on that, because, we haven't done that investment because we don't have a capacity issue at the treatment plant.
yeah.
Um,
But, the reason I'm asking is it is easier to treat more concentrated effluent than it is, or flow than it is when there's a lot of water.
Right,
next
and
to it.
I do know
More
some
efficient.
communities have gone into the replacement portion. It's probably not everywhere, right, and actually them sealing up their laterals caused the water table to come up, and it didn't save them any I&I because it found new areas to go to, and it still got into their sanitary system, and it's still causing them issues.
Okay.
So, I mean, here it might not do that, you know, but I know some communities have mandated, and they haven't really seen the reduction that they were originally
Hoping for, okay.
Keep going. So, you know, last year we approved this key performance indicator report. And again, this goes through financial metrics as well as a few operating metrics. You know, again, I just wanted to point out, like on the water rate of return in 2017, that was 3.17%. I got to look at, see where we're at in 2018. We usually report that right around when we do the utility audit. But if the authorized rate of return is, you know, 5.5%, 6%, and we go in for a water funding program, either a grant or loan program on the water utility, within 2 years you have to go in for a full water rate case. That 3% rate of return, that they're going to do a financial calculation to make sure that that 3% goes back to 5.5 or 6%. So that's, and it's not just simply that. That's not like a 3% or a 2% increase. It's actually a much larger percentage than that, because they will review by rate class what the rates should be structured by rate class and size of meter. So that's one of the things that they would be looking at. But then when you go on the back side, you know, under sewer operations, that's where, you know, sewer pipe failures, we've had 0. Lift station failures, we've had 0. Sewer overflows, 0. So that's again where we haven't had a capacity problem or sewer pipe failure or lift station failures or, again, wastewater treatment plant. Now we did have in 2018 we did have for sewer overflows, I guess technically that'll say 1 in 2018, and it didn't reach the river. The issue was there was a pipe that broke at the treatment plant, which caused some spillage of sewer, and that happened overnight. And that was a reportable incident to the DNR. And so that'll show as 1, but in general, that was a pipe that broke at the treatment. It's not a capacity problem from so from an I&I problem, if we had I&I issues and capacity issues, we'd see that in these numbers, and it will also be in our annual report that we would.
And that won't show up till 2019.
Yeah, okay, 2019. Oh, it happened in 2019, not 18. Yeah, okay. So 2018 would still be 0. So, you know, there isn't based on the data, there isn't a significant I&I or capacity issue, you know, but that's what the data shows. Now I just kind of want to flip over. Now this is the fun chart. Brian had a lot of fun with this one. This one, and it actually says sewer laterals on it. There's 2 of them, sewer laterals. But in the green box, you know, just so the council's aware, kind of how management or city staff is looking at it. You know, future utility rate increases. You guys should be aware of this. You know, we still have to come back and finalize our stormwater utility rates. But the goal right now is to be implementing those in 2020. The exact date is to be decided, but it's likely, you know, that you know, I say $1.50 to $2, but in reality, the range is probably $1.50 to $2.50 per month. So that's kind of the real range. You know, try to keep it. Our goal when we started to do this was try to keep it around $2 or less. But just so the council's aware, that's kind of, you know, how the stormwater utility will impact ratepayers. On the electric side, you know, our strategy is to finish up our substation. We did the electrical distribution study, and then we have substation 2 and number 4 upgrades. The number 2 project is being completed this year, and then we want to finish our AMI. After those projects are done, it's likely that we'll be looking at a rate application somewhere between 2021 to 2024. So I can't tell you what the rate increase will be, but our last adjustment was year 2015 on the electric side. So, you know, when, you know, you want to in general, the rule of thumb is to keep your electric rates up to date every 5 years. We'll go a little bit longer than that. Water rate, we just did we did for 2018, or actually for 2019, we did a 3%, no, that was 2018, we did a 3%. I think that was in fall of 2018, I believe, we did a 3% simplified rate case on that. Now, a simplified rate case is different than a full rate case. So what the commission ordered on the PSC approved, we can't, for the water lateral program, we can't do a simplified rate case. We have to do a full rate case. But if we don't do a program, staff was planning on looking at, 2021, 22, somewhere in there, potentially a 3% simplified rate case. But that, again, that's to be determined. And then sewer utility, unknown for phosphorus yet, we don't know, but we did approve a 2020 increase of a 2.9% to a volume charge and a 2.1% increase to the average residential customer. So that's what we've already approved for the year 2020. So that's just kind of what the rate picture looks like, just so everyone, has an understanding of what we've talked about and kind of the outlook as to when we'll be looking at doing things. And then let's start on the, in the yellow boxes are questions, and I don't know if it's easier to just kind of read those questions first, or maybe I'll go through this and then I'll reference the yellow questions, but starting on the left-hand side, the orange box. Again, and I even put this in my cover memo for the 2 cows we're having. Do you want to mandate private water lateral replacements? Do you want to mandate private sewer lateral replacements? If so, under what framework or circumstances, and how do you want it financed, right? Because last time we went through and answered these questions and we developed the policy. Now we want to revisit the policy, and what I'm trying to do is say, these are all the options. Here's a slate. These are all the options to look at, or at least the ones that I can think of primarily. And so do you want to mandate sewer lateral replacements? Well, let's start off by going no and follow that flow chart. If you say no, option 1 is no funding offered. Option 2, 100% financial assistance offered. And then go to the gray box to the right of that. That's where we could look at the RLF program loan funding for laterals on a voluntary basis. That's that in 2026, when we create the housing revolving loan fund, we can use that bucket of money. We can also use our existing RLF loan funds to provide that funding on a voluntary basis. So that follows the no. Now let's go back and go to and say, do you want to mandate sewer lateral replacements? And say, yes, I do. The first question staff would propose from a policy perspective is, do you want to mandate based on a deficiency, or do you want to mandate on clay material? Now I didn't put it on here, but a third option would be mandate both, deficiency or clay material. But essentially then you're essentially mandating clay material. But those are two different. Keel, again, mandates on deficiency. Sheboygan Falls mandates on material. Two different perspectives on how to deal with that. Go to the right to that. Either way, we would have to implement a lateral inspection program, which is something we have not done today. Which means we would have to, we should really, as part of a project, televise private laterals so we know what material they are made out of, but also what their condition is. Okay? So that would be something, a program we'd have to implement. Obviously, the cost of that would probably be in just the cost of doing business and sewer rates, more than likely. And then to the right, there's lots of different ways and to fund it, and questions. And I say up to the right, top, I say top gray box, everyone follow me up here. I say if deficiencies exist, how do you fund 100% financial assistance? So that's the question. Yes, no, maybe. You could provide a loan, you could provide grant. I mean, there's all kinds of different ways you could look at this. One option is to do a special charge loan program. where you are requiring people to pay for it, and you do a special charge, and then if that special charge isn't paid for, it goes on to the property tax levy, and with a special charge, there is no public hearing. If you go the special charge route, go to the right, where does funding come from? Again, you would still have the option of looking at the tax levy, you would have the option of looking at the sewer utility, or if you're just doing a special charge with no grants, you could look at the revolving loan fund programs that I mentioned down below where I said no. If you special assess loan program, kind of the biggest, can I just go through the special assess option? The real difference there is that there's a public hearing required. You have the same sorts of questions. Where does funding come from? Tax levy, utility, revolving loan fund. I mentioned tax levy funding because technically that is an option. Obviously that does result in subsidies because you would be using your tax levy funds either through cash through the capital projects fund or you'd borrow money. But if you provided a tax levy funded, that means all commercial and industrial properties are also paying that based on their property taxes. So that does result in a subsidy, but you can use general fund dollars to help. 100% sewer rates. Again, the question of if you did that, you know, how do you want the fixed fee versus the volume charges to look like? What do you want that to look like? And then if the program is 100% in sewer rates, you know, the likelihood is that'll result in a larger cross subsidy where again you have you have two issues. One is commercial and industrial ratepayers potentially paying, but you also have potentially people that don't need to replace their laterals paying for it, depending on how you structure it. Or combo funding example, lots of different combo ways to do it, but here I just said right-of-way covered by sewer rates, and then you use the special assessment and or other funding. Special assessment, you could use the RLF program, for example, cover this through sewer rates, cover the row, and then special assess the rest, use the RLF program. But again, where does funding come from, percentage, you know, those are policy decisions you guys would have to think about. And then just a couple yellow comments in the yellow boxes, starting with way on the left. You know, what should the program look like for areas where we have already replaced or lined sewer mains? So if you implement a program, you know, what is the because these are questions we'll eventually get if you do implement a program. What about me is the questions we'll get. What about me, who on Milwaukee Street, you did me a couple years, what program is there available for me to get funding to replace my sewer lateral? What about annexed properties and new homes? I think of the three properties on Highland that were just annexed. They paid for their laterals to connect. New homes, that's part of the cost of, you know, new home. Do you want new homeowners to subsidize others, or are you going to offer a rebate program through the utility? Another one is utility customer versus property owner. We have a lot of rentals in Plymouth where someone owns the house and they're getting rental income, but yet the renter is paying the utility bill. So then you potentially, if it's in sewer rates, you potentially have the renter paying for the cost of the lateral in the sewer rates, but yet the property owner is benefiting from the program. So that's something, you know, that's an issue. And again, I already said this, how do we treat a customer that replaces sewer lateral outside of a street utility project? So let's say my sewer fails on another street, you're not coming around to do my street in 10 years, and I have to replace my sewer. Are we offering any program to those kind of spot projects? Next yellow box, continue $750 charges or put cost in sewer rates, and I mean fixed fee and volume. Again, potentially cross subsidy. Another question then going to the right, do we still align sewer mains? So if engineering does not recommend need to replace a sewer main, But because we're already doing a project, maybe it makes sense to line it. Then what do we do with laterals? And I think that's an interesting discussion because, you know, there's also the perspective of, well, we're lining it because it doesn't cost a lot and we're already here. But if we're also lining the private laterals and that increased the costs, but yet engineering says you really could just leave the sewer main untouched, that potentially could be a discussion. And then just a reminder that on the Hine Avenue project, for lining, the cost was $28.89 per lineal foot, and for sewer main replacement, it was $86.02. So if the council just said, you're not doing any lining projects ever, you know, based on the recent bid, that's the cost difference per lineal foot. So what I tried to do is paint a broad picture of all the options that I could think of. I didn't throw on here the sewer insurance program, because in my mind, the sewer insurance program could be something a private individual can do outside of city government. But I tried to present different pathways and different options and questions. And I kind of did the same thing on the water side. I don't know, on the water side, I don't need to go through as many. Kathy is going to bring that up just for the audience. Sure. Why don't we go back? Kathy, he wants to ask questions about sewer yet before we go to water.
Okay, when, on the very bottom where it's 100% assistance offered and an RLF program takes 2026 to take place.
No, remember, I kind of talked to you about that in some of the committee meetings, is that the housing is in 2026, but because our RLF fund is defederalized, we have flexibility on how to use those funds. So in the short term, we could use the business revolving loan program to provide loans to people through that fund up until 2026, and then that program would continue, but we just use the housing fund permanently.
So
We could start doing
next
this.
year, I mean, obviously can't do it this year and didn't do it last for Reed Street, but we could start next year using monies to give people loans so they
Yes.
can get this done.
Yes.
So we have not done that until now, so.
Well,
that's-
part of the reason is the program, the RLF program wasn't defederalized till February, and, you know, I think staff and, you know, there's still lots of questions of what we can or can't do from a business revolving loan fund perspective. But on the agenda tonight, we have the resolution, TIF number 4 resolution, where we're establishing a repayment schedule for the Willow Road project and the railroad project to the RLF fund, and so there's gonna be additional cash flow coming in as well. And I think based on the size and scope of our street projects, we could provide 100% financial assistance through the RLF program. Going forward, regardless of whether you mandate or not. There's still a question, you mandate or not mandate.
Right.
But through the loan, basically, process, whether, you know, basically we could do it as a special, you know.
They pay interest, everything, but that could
Yeah.
be done going to
Correct.
Appleton Street, whatever it is next year, if we approve
Yep.
that or not.
Now, there still has to be some policy decisions around that, because is that program just for residential and multifamily, or will you make that program available to commercial and industrial? I don't know. We haven't talked about that.
But then they'd have to pay higher rates if you did that. Because if you put industrial, you said it's.
No, if it's a loan through the RLF fund, it's not hitting the general fund and it's not hitting the utility. You could roll that out to more than just, but that would be a policy decision.
So that's good news that potentially going, if the group.
Correct.
Suggests this, that we could give some financial assistance for persons that would like to get their sewer replaced or their lead lines replaced, but can't afford the $3,000 to $5,000 right off the bat. They can get this loan so they can take care of business that they couldn't in other years if they didn't have
Yes.
the money.
Yes,
Okay.
the answer is yes.
What,
pending council approval.
right,
A follow-up on that, if I may. We're talking about the loan, and in our ordinance, we currently have established by ordinance a 7-year
make it 10 years.
type of thing. And I'm just saying that if we, no matter what 2019 or 2026 program we follow, my assumption would be we would still continue the same 7-year ordinance program so that we don't have different buckets and everything. The difference between the 7-year and the 10-year isn't that significant.
I did talk with the clerk's office, and one comment, you know, the 7-year, 10-year, that's a policy. Kind of,
Right.
that's up to you. One thing that staff would request, we kind of talked about, is if we use the RLF fund program to fund it, is to prefer to do it where it's an annual payment and/or come and pay your balance off, not monthly payments, because, you know, on year one, let's say there's 25 people that make a monthly payment, and it's over 7 or 10 years. In year two, we do another project, then there's another 25. Year three, we have another 25. Well, then we have 75 people on a monthly basis coming in to make payment to the clerk's office. That doesn't seem efficient for staff, and so it would be more of a once-a-year payment arrangement versus a monthly. That would be the staff recommendation on that, but, you know, the 7, 10-year, you know, I don't know if it matters that much. But just pointing out that our current ordinance is very specific and says 7 years.
Out of all the options, the special assessed load program, it requires a public hearing, you said, right?
Special assessment does.
Yeah, is that the only one that requires that? Out of all those
Well,
options?
when you approve the tax levy and the city budget, technically the city holds a public hearing on the annual budget. So if you include funding from the general fund for a program, technically you could say that's also a public hearing on that expense. And then, we don't have a public hearing for establishing sewer rates. On the water side, the Public Service Commission requires an official telephonic hearing, which is basically a hearing where we have an intercom set up with PSC in Madison, and people can come to that hearing and give testimony, and they have to be sworn in. And so I guess you could say that that is an official hearing, and if you did a water program. That would be only at the time the program is established, though.
Mhm.
And,
Attorney Faber?
for the public hearing for the special assessments, it's really a public hearing designed to allow property owners to clarify what they're being assessed on. For example, if the city records show that, one property owner had 100 feet of lateral that needed to be replaced, and the property owner says, wait a minute, I just had this, I know that it's only 80 feet. It would then be a trigger for the city to take a look at that. Is there, some discrepancy in what our numbers show versus what their numbers show? And so the public hearing shouldn't be focused on whether or not it's a good idea to special assess. It's really just an opportunity for individual property owners to make sure that we have the correct information upon which we're basing the special assessment.
Thank you.
Charlie?
The question I have as far as the sewer under the road replacement, why would we require that to be done?
Well, historically, we have not required it to be done up until last year. And at that time, and it's reflected in the minutes, and when we had this original meetings in April and May, staff said, based on talking with our peers in the public works sector and the administrator sector, that it is a common thing to have a program where you're replacing it within the, so that it's outside of the roadway. One reason is and I think there's different ways to look at it, but let's say we didn't televise the private side and we didn't replace that section, and that person does have a cracked pipe, now we redo a road, not only would our road get tore up, but you've seen where a patch repair and up to like $12,000, right?
I mean,
It can vary,
Depends
but
on
it's a
the road.
significant more cost for the homeowner if they have to replace it.
Right, and
Pavement.
for instance on Reed Street, and typically the water lateral is in the same trench as the sanitary lateral. And remember, we only did it for half of Reed Street, because that was the only portion that we were replacing the sewer main on. And so instead of just reconnecting their own old lateral, we extended it an additional 20 feet to get to outside the roadway. So the section from south to Hine didn't have any sanitary laterals touch, only Houston to South Street. Because we're already touching it, so we can add another 20 feet, get it out of the roadway. So I would say if communities aren't touching sanitary, they're probably not touching their, the laterals. But
We strictly want to save the road for future.
laterals and, right, I mean, it's easier, so like the contractor on Reed Street, they were so tight together, like literally on top of each other, for them to replace the water lateral and, to bring it out with the sanitary lateral, kind of also made their life easier.
Happened on Reed Street too, to some or Hine Avenue. Happened some to that extent because the water lateral goes right over the sewer lateral. And there's a lot of incidents where the contractor put new piping in there.
Because it's gonna be faster.
They broke it.
Right,
They broke it and they had, the
it's-
contractor's
yeah,
expense, not the,
correct.
but there was numerous places that they did replace the sewer lateral that was broken by the contractor. And there's a couple of Ys replaced on the old part.
Yeah, so as, we actually talked about that one day, and the contractor actually broke it on purpose.
So in some instances, because it was gonna take them more time
Because
to
it was-
go around it. than
Correct,
to pay
because it
for
was
an
more
additional
efficient for the
footage.
contractor to break
Labor
it.
is
See that.
expensive.
Correct. But that's something the contractor chose to do.
Right, and paid for that cost.
But if you put a new road in, and you, like it happened on North Milwaukee Street a few years ago, they had to dig it up, put in some other sewer lines,
Yes.
and you never got the compact right,
So the,
and you got the bumps.
yeah, so just to clarify, so the primary issue there, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you have a different understanding, was what collapsed was actually the main, correct? On Milwaukee, North Milwaukee?
Yes, it
It was
was.
the main, not laterals. It was the main.
Yes.
And the reason, and that was not that was not lined. It was not, so that clay pipe probably could have been lined. But at that time, previous management decided to leave the sewer alone, not do a lining project. And they figure kind of the pounding of the machines working on the project probably caused some issues with that old pipe, and then eventually collapsed. So it wasn't the lateral, it was the main.
Okay.
But that, yeah.
The other, and I'll stop here because we'll bring up the next meeting on it, but the cost of the lateral lining and lateral replacement, there's issues that are not discussed that potentially took place on Hine Avenue that I'd like to discuss at a different time, but I'd like to have the staff go with the water if they would like to.
Yeah, I mean, really, the water is very similar. Really, just the same sort of questions, but the difference, I guess, really is the no is exactly the same for the sewer. But if you mandate the private water laterals, then the question you have to ask is, do you want it to be a city program, or do you want it to be a PSC approved program? And then again, if it's a PSC approved program, is it a utility loan through the water utility only? Or is it a loan and grant program through the water utility? And then if it's a loan and grant percentage, fixed dollars, where do funds come from? Do you want it to come from debt, cash flow, state trust fund loan, and have the water utility responsible for that debt? And then again, if it's a city program on the water side, again, it is a special charge, it is a special assessment, tax levy, grant funding. Again, that was where, was it Menasha? Offered $1,000 program on the water side from the city, $1,000 from the PSC approved water program, and then the last amount came through a loan through the water utility. So again, very similar, just if you do mandate, what are you looking at the funding to be? Are you looking at the funding program to be a city-based program or a water utility-based program?
Let somebody else speak and else. Does anyone else have questions before I babble on?
If we have any other questions on this part, otherwise, if we can back up, Charlie, and if you want to go through your next question
Well,
so that we cover it all tonight, that's fine.
I have a question on this particular point. If
Are you on water or sewer?
water.
Water,
It could be
okay.
water, it could be sewer. But Sheboygan Falls, if I'm understanding this, Director Austin, Sheboygan Falls, when they mandated the cost to do this, everybody had to do either pipe bursting, if I understand it right, or Keel had to do water pipe bursting. When everybody does that, you get a considerably lower rate for every person on the street. If it is not needed to be done, I'm not sure how that works out, but the rates go from potentially, $500 to $600 more per person's home to quite a bit less if everybody comes and pipe bursts it or has it dug out. It's a considerably, and check me on this, but it's a considerable cost if you have everybody in the street do it and you get a company to come in and bid this done. If you have individuals do it on the street, as some streets have done, then it costs different rates across the line. And then you have different timelines when it's going to be done. So if it's a mandated situation, or if you could, I guess, but if it's a mandated situation, the person knows in February when the meeting takes place, your street is going to be done, you're going to have to replace the sewer, you're going to have to replace the water, this is potentially what the cost is going to be, and it's going to be done at this particular rate because you get company bids to come in on doing it. If you do it in an individual basis, it varies. So there's a considerable,
I don't know the amount, considerable amount versus individual, I'm sure there is a cost savings when a contractor can come in and do 20 versus coming in and do one, I'm sure.
And the holes are opened?
Well, holes are open, their machinery's already on site, they have one mold cost, so yeah, I'm sure it's cheaper with the prices,
Yeah.
Is it hundreds, is it, I don't know.
Okay. And that's, I'm sorry.
When you charge $750 here, when you did that road last year,
This year.
Didn't charge last
The
year.
first time it happened was.
okay,
as
when
high
you
as-
charged, did you charge everybody 750?
No.
Or
Any-
did you go by the foot?
No, we charged $750 to where we replaced main,
Yeah.
and the homeowner didn't replace their sewer lateral.
They did,
So what was it, out of, is
So
it three?
there was 4 homes on Hine Avenue that were in the sewer, the sewer main replaced area. One resident had their private plumber replace the entirety, so they did not get the $750 charge because they replaced it all the way up to the main on their own. And then the other 3 homeowners, doesn't matter on their linear footage, got the $750 charge.
okay.
Because it was decided upon at the time, when we had the previous meetings back in 2018, that, it's not really the homeowner's fault that the sewer's on the other side of the road. So the council at that time decided to just make it one flat fee versus actual linear footage.
And it also was based on cost, approximate cost when we did the Reed Street project. At the time when we were talking about this, we were in the middle of the Reed Street project.
So we ended up doing 4 this year, that 3 we charged the $750 for, One we didn't because they did their own.
Yep.
And so that was 4 out of how many?
Was there 20?
24.
Yeah, 24.
Because the rest of the project we did sewer lining, so we didn't have main replacement.
That's the point. On the sewer replacement, that's where that 750 comes into play.
So 20.
So it's not all
Okay.
24.
Correct. Was everybody able to get the sewer replacement done, that they wanted to get
Well,
done?
there was one resident that I know that did not. He had a contractor lined up and his contractor backed out, and then he couldn't get a replacement done in time. But that contractor backed out on more people and they were able to find someone, so I don't know what his time frame was on, trying to reconnect with another plumber or
We
not.
definitely tried, but,
Was there a day late? I don't know, I'm not
Well,
sure.
the
But,
project-
Yeah, the one plumber had, I think, 5 homes lined up and he backed out of all of that because he was unable to do it in that time frame. And then, but, those other homes did still have it done by another plumber and he was not able to. But he could still line, he can do other mechanisms, but yes, correct.
the project, maybe off the top a little bit, but the residents on High Avenue are extremely pleased with the workmanship and how the project progressed on High Avenue. I just wanted to kind of mention that. They're very happy. The road's been paved twice now. They're just waiting for the medium, and of course, Reed Street's, never mind.
It was the donuts you bought.
Yes. That made a difference.
I want to interrupt here in the spirit of time in order to give council members a 5-minute break in between the committee of the whole and the council meeting to start at 8 o'clock. So with this, if you have any additional questions, concerns, by all means, please contact staff, and Brian and Director Austin will certainly try to answer any concerns that you have. It's rather detailed, and it is very complicated since we're not engineers and laborers on the job. But with that, thank you for the attention that you brought to it. And we will have a adjournment and reconvene at 8 o'clock for the council meeting.
So move to adjourn.
Thank you. We
Alderman
have
Mattson?
we have a first and a second. Any discussion? Follow up with the staff. Thank you very much. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned till 8. Thank you.
Get up and walk a little bit.
The knees.
3.